Hi. In this video, we are going to discuss the first 3 things to do when you decide that you are interested in waking up from the dream of separation. If you've decided that awakening and realization is what you're interested in, then I want to give you 3 pointers that can get you started if the spiritual marketplace, the spiritual community is just too confusing. There is so much available online and different types of pointings, different types of teachings. It can be intimidating to even know where to start. So I just want to give 3 principles or 3 simple and practical things that you can do to get this process underway. So the number 1 thing to do to start the process of awakening is quite profound, although it may not sound like a big deal. That is, acknowledge that this is the most important thing to you. Acknowledge it at least within yourself. You don't necessarily have to say that to anybody else. Somewhere inside, it's important to recognize that this is my heart's longing. This is what I'm most interested in. The most interesting thing to me is living truth. The most interesting thing to me is shedding all the layers of inauthenticity and identity and learned social conditioning and find out what's real. I want to come in contact with unfiltered reality and live it. Now, I wouldn't take this acknowledgement lightly. If you decide to turn your attention to this possibility, very powerful forces will come to your aid, and you can't know what they are ahead of time. I could give you examples, but you're going to have to walk your own path. All I will tell you is this is a decision to make with an understanding and appreciation for the gravity of what you're inviting into your life. If that sounds like fun to you, if that sounds like what you're interested in, then by all means, look inward and make the commitment to yourself to make the number 1 priority in your life awakening. That's the most important thing you can do. Number 2 is expose yourself to some sort of teacher or teaching or pointing that really resonates with you. That can be online resources, maybe you like Adyashanti videos, or you read the book The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and the path you want to take is diving deeper into that text. There are many great videos online made by deeply realized teachers. If you resonate with them, if it feels relevant to you, make friends with somebody who has walked this path ahead of you, a realized teacher, a realized friend. Spend time around them. Find out how it feels to be around them. Ask them questions about how they experience self, how they experience the sense world, how they experience thoughts and emotions. You have every right to investigate this, and there are many, many good resources now that can point you in the right direction. So find something, find someone that you really resonate with that seems to point past the conditioned experience of being you into the unconditioned experience of whatever comes beyond you, whatever comes beyond this seeming moment in time, this seeming moment in space, this seeming separate body and mind. Anyone who can point past that for you, who can help you recognize the shifts that can happen instantaneously in your experience. Perhaps if it feels relevant to you, develop a relationship or a formal teacher-student agreement with a teacher, a Zen teacher, a Dzogchen teacher, an Advaita teacher. Anyone you feel has the ability to truly and authentically point you past your conditioned experience. The third thing you can do to start this process of awakening and get it underway also happens to be something that will carry you a long way down this path. And in fact, in one form or another, it will be very useful, even through awakening and through deepening of realization, even non-dual realization, and that is inquiry. Inquiry is an incredibly powerful tool if used wisely. I'm going to start here by giving you a very, very simple approach to inquiry that you can begin immediately if you are just starting out on this path. If you don't really know where to go next, you don't know whether you should read, whether you should watch some videos, whether you should learn to meditate, maybe you already meditate and you want to find a way to augment that meditation practice and start to really investigate the deeper truths that are alive right here and right now. This is going to be a very simple inquiry exercise that has worked for many, many people. Self-inquiry is really an investigation of the nature of thought and identity. You can do this while meditating, you can do this while laying in bed, while taking a shower or a bath, while driving. There's no limitation to when and where you can perform inquiry. Although at first it's often easier to do while you're meditating or while you have silence and no distraction. It's very simple. We simply become aware of the thoughts that are moving through our mind. Whatever the next thought is, just notice it. And often the thought is something about practice. It feels like a thought about me. It feels like my thought. It doesn't necessarily always feel like a thought because we are identified with it often. So there might be a simple thought like, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. Now the moment you recognize that as a thought, you will almost instantaneously recognize that it seems to be a thought about me, right? I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. The thought wasn't, Joe isn't sure if he's doing this right. And it wasn't, Mary isn't sure if she's doing this right. It was, I am not sure if I'm doing this right. Now, this seems completely obvious, of course, and it doesn't seem earth-shattering to recognize this. The next part is a little more interesting. We're going to actually look and see if we can find the person that thought seems to be about. What's weird about this is that what we're looking for is something most people have assumed their entire life. They've assumed it's there and strangely haven't actually gone to look for it. Now, if they have gone to look for it and they're sincere in the looking, then at some point they're going to wake up. So the fact that the majority of people alive have not woken up yet in this way we're discussing, demonstrates that most people actually don't look for evidence for who or what they are, or what they're referring to in the thought, when they seem to be thinking the thought, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not sure if I know what I'm doing. Okay? So I kind of said all of that to drive the point home that this is a different kind of looking than we're used to. There's something about the momentum of the mind that actually keeps us from looking this way. It keeps us kind of leapfrogging from thought to thought to thought without paying attention to what we're doing, without recognizing the fact that we're actually kind of jumping over gaps that we don't notice. So when you just consider a single thought like, I'm not sure I know what I'm doing right now, and you recognize it as what it is, it's one thought right here. It arose out of who knows what. It's going to disappear into who knows what at some point, right? But for the moment, there's a thought that says, I don't know what I'm doing right now. Now, can you just start to look internally, like around that thought? Or try to look back at what it is that's looking at that thought, that believes that thought, that says, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you find the one that thought refers to? You may notice that the mind goes quiet. And you may notice that that becomes uncomfortable, or you may not. For some people, this becomes uncomfortable very quickly. When the mind goes quiet, it's almost as if we're a little afraid to admit to ourselves that we actually can't find the sense of me. Or we can't find what that thought refers to, but there's definitely something there. A sort of thoughtless space, yes? This is self-inquiry. Now, if another thought comes almost immediately, which is common, especially if the mind identification is pretty solid, that says, oh, I know who I am, I'm Angelo, I'm Joe, I'm whoever I am, yeah? I know who I am, I know where I came from, I know when I was born, I know who my parents are. That's fine when that happens. It's important, however, to recognize those are also thoughts, right? So if one thought says, I don't know what's going on, and then when we ask, well, who am I that doesn't know what's going on? And then another thought says, well, I know who I am. You see what happened there? Who is it that recognized the second thought? Who is it that was there before the first thought, noticing the first thought, looking around to find out who the first thought is about, and then is also there when the second thought suddenly grabs the attention? Yeah? Do you see how that works? Now, again, watch for successive thoughts. Watch for more thoughts that just start to explain what's happening. Well, I know how the mind works. I know how the brain works. It's, neurotransmitters, it's neurons, etc., etc. Notice thought, 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 thought. Now turn back around and ask yourself, who are all these thoughts about? Who are these thoughts referring to? Can I find the one that is aware of these thoughts? If a thought says, well, I believe that I'm a human being, great. Who's the one that's aware of that thought? Or what is aware of that thought? Look for it. You can become aware of the thought, so why can't you become aware of the one that is aware of that thought? Look for it. Feel into it. Turn around and find it. That's self-inquiry. And you can do it thought after thought after thought. That works. Just keep your attention open for the next thought to arise. And as soon as it does, clarify, what is that thought? And if it's an I thought, which almost all thoughts are one way or another, referring back to me, then look and see, can you find the one that's aware of the thought? Or can you find the one that that thought is about? And you might notice there's a lot of facts about me, but every single one of them is a thought. And yet, whatever's aware of those thoughts is there before, during, and after each thought, including between thoughts. You don't disappear between thoughts, do you? The sense of you, the aware one, the conscious one, the one observing the thoughts, the one listening to this voice, doesn't actually disappear between thoughts. So how can it actually be a thought? And then at some point, you'll find yourself able to just rest back in to that pure, conscious, or aware space. And it may be pretty obvious that that space is I. The sense of I, the sense of I am. Because what else could it be? The thoughts are all saying, I am this, I am that, I'm confused, I'm smart, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm male, I'm female, I was born at this time, I was born in this year, this is my parent. That's what the thoughts are saying, yeah? But the one who's aware of those thoughts doesn't change. Doesn't come or go with those thoughts at all. Doesn't change at all. In fact, you could say that those thoughts come and go in what is, in what I am. So this is self-inquiry turning into a sort of pure inquiry where there's just a resting in that sense of I, or I am. Or pure, awake knowing without an object of knowing. Just the you that you've always been, completely still, not requiring any thoughts. Just rest right there. Now, the practice is to stay there. You can lead yourself back into it through the process I described again and again. But at some point, it will be obvious that you are always there and you can continue to rest there without any thoughts, or without grabbing onto thoughts, without getting caught in the stream of thoughts. That's self-inquiry. It's one version of self-inquiry, but it's a pretty pure version of it. So if you find a slightly different way to do it, if someone describes a different process that works, but it's along these lines, that's great. This isn't the only way to do it. If you want more information about inquiry and self-inquiry and self-inquiry for awakening, you can always check out my book, Awake, It's Your Turn. I go into a lot more detail than this in the book, and people have found it pretty helpful. So good luck, and let me know what you thought of this talk, if you have any questions or you want to hear me expand on any aspect of what I talked about today. Have a great day. It's critically important that you trust your own experience. This goes for all areas of life. But what do I mean by your own experience? Well, first of all, you have to recognize the nature of what a thought is. To know that the belief in the narrative, the internal narrative in the mind, the hypnotic listening to the thoughts, believing that everything a thought says about you is true, and that you have to listen closely, not miss anything, and react and respond to that stream of thoughts. It has to be seen that this is unnecessary, that a thought is just a thought, and a stream of thoughts is simply a stream of thoughts. It doesn't touch you, it doesn't move what you are. There's something primary, the experience of you, the experience of I, let's say, that is just not contingent upon any thought at all. It can be aware of a thought, but even then it's not aware as a subject to a thought object. The thought appears in and as the awareness itself. The thought appears in and as the consciousness itself. So, the awareness is an awareness of being, rather than an awareness of an object called a thought. So that's really the first two steps there. One is we have to disidentify from thought, meaning see that the internal narrative doesn't actually represent anything but a reflection of itself. Thoughts reflecting thoughts, reflecting thoughts. That's the house of mirrors of mind identification that feels so uncomfortable. So once we recognize that, we're able to disidentify to some degree from thoughts. Then we have the opportunity to collapse the experience of a subject and object inside of consciousness. This means that a thought is not separate from what you are, and what you are is not separate from thought, and what you are is not separate from consciousness, and consciousness and the sense of I, and the sense of a thought moving, stirring, dissolving, is all the same soup, the same substance. Now, the risk here is that what I'm saying will be understood by your mind, will just become part of the narrative. That's not what I'm pointing to. It's a much more fundamental knowing that there really is no narrative that defines anything. There's only movement of thought. And overlooking the sense that we are the thinker, the sense that we're the thinker, not that we are, but overlooking that sense, then we have an ongoing reaction to thoughts. We have an ongoing reaction to our internal world, where we're relating, struggling, pushing, pulling. That's mind identification. When that relationship, that struggle, that pushing and pulling stops, the moment it stops, there's a knowing, an immediate, obvious, undeniable knowing of the unity of this consciousness. Unity simply meaning there's nothing apart from it. No thought you've ever thought, no belief, no narrative, no image in the mind, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, scary or blissful, it's all just made out of that same substance. Nothing to fear, nothing apart, nothing coming or going. That's to know self as consciousness. Self as consciousness. Nothing needs to be said from here. It's a transition from knowing to being, or a transition from thoughts, being the thinker, not even recognizing it, feeling like the thinker, not even recognizing it, because that thought stream just seems like the way the world is. It's a transition between that and pure knowingness. Knowingness that requires no object of knowing, that has no object of knowing. It knows only itself. It's an endless inward reflection and an endless outward reflection. You can't perceive anything that's not already just this consciousness. There is realization beyond perception, but it's very subtle. With that said, anything that can be perceived, thought of, understood, believed, doubted, all of that thought content, all of the movement of thought, the space in which that thought occurs, the sense of being a thinker, whether conscious or unconscious, all of it is seamlessly just this one substance of knowing, which is simultaneously the substance of being. Knowing and being here are seamless, but it's not informational knowing. It's not a knowledge base. It's not understanding. It's too settled to be an understanding. When we understand something, we feel happy because we didn't understand it before. This isn't of that nature. There's no way you can't know this. It's that clear, that pervasive, that undoubtable. So you can lead yourself here with questions like, what is here right now that's not a thought? Obviously, you're not going to look for a thought answer to that question. Or, who am I right now when I use no thought or memory to define myself? Or, can I just settle right in this moment into the sense of being without thinking? You only need one question. You don't have to find the perfect inquiry question, just find one that works for you. Find one that stops the mind. Find one that causes an immediate disengagement from the thought stream, including doubt. Doubt is the sneakiest thought in this process. Catches people all the time. If you believe doubt, if you really believe doubt, meaning you don't see it as a thought, it will bind you for years. The moment you actually see it really is one thought, the shackles are off. It can't bind you. The binding has more to do with you than the thought or belief. So, part of it is just being willing to be a bit uncomfortable by letting go of that story or that narrative. Part of it is just seeing it. Seeing, wow, that's one doubt. That's one thought. And I believed it. So what's here right now when I let go of all doubts? There's another question. What is the experience of being right now when I don't doubt anything? And I don't affirm anything? When I don't assign qualities or characteristics to me? Does me disappear? Does I disappear? The sense of being, does it go away when we don't assign characteristics to it? Memories, doubts. Let all those thoughts drop now. Don't conclude anything about this. It's not about conclusions. Don't record. Just stay there. Someone asked me in comments to discuss the I am sense. The first distinction I want to make about the I am sense is that what I'm going to talk about here is an experience. With awakening, one wakes up to or realizes this pure sense as the fundamental experience of identity, or a more fundamental experience of identity than what seemed to be the one doing the practicing, the one trying to wake up, the one that seeks, the one that imagines finding a better way, a better place, a better experience. So the experience of I am can be tasted rather easily once you know where to look, or how to look, or rather how not to look for something. So in this video, I'm going to point to the I am sense, how to recognize what it is that I'm talking about. So the next distinction I want to make is that what I'm pointing to with the I am sense is so simple, it's so close, that its simplicity and its closeness are exactly what makes it challenging to recognize what it is. We're in the habit of thinking in terms of discovering, finding, learning, understanding, gaining some knowledge later. We're in the habit of endlessly seeking. And the only place we can seek is in thought. The only place we can seek is in the imagination, in mind. Because to seek, you need a concept of future. You need a concept of somewhere else, or another possibility. None of these can be found in presence. So this is why identity gets tied up into thoughts and concepts. And it's also the barrier that we have to breach to wake up to this pure sense of being. The first step in that direction is often to taste or remember or recognize what the I am sense actually is. So again, it's so simple what I'm pointing to. It's so close to you that it's very easy to overlook, because the mechanism of mind that's endlessly seeking something outside of this moment, or something outside of actually you, is a distraction. And that distraction will catch your attention early and say, oh, great, let's use this description to find what we've been looking for. But what I'm pointing to is primary to all of that movement. I'm pointing to something that's primary to the sense of the one trying to make the discovery, trying to make any discovery. I'm pointing to you, or the most fundamental primary sense of you as being, awakeness, consciousness, awareness, but none of those terms. I'm not pointing to the terms, I'm not pointing to the thoughts. I'm not pointing to an idea called I am, or a thought or concept called I am. I'm not pointing to a way to perceive yourself differently, because to perceive yourself, you have to experience a thought. This isn't about perceiving, it's about being. So what is it that's right at the center of you right now? And when I say what is it, I don't mean think about what it is, or give me an answer, or give yourself an answer. I mean inhabit it. And more precisely, see that you've never not inhabited this. It's a stopping. Stop moving forward. Stop grasping for thoughts. Stop grasping for what you think I am is, because what you think it is a thought. What I'm pointing to is that which is perceiving the thought. I'm pointing to the closest, most intimate experience of you before you start thinking. The you that's just there, whether there's a thought or not. It's there before the thought, during the thought, and after the thought. It's the one thing you can't seek because it's doing the seeking. It's the one thing you can't find because you're always looking out from it. It's the one place you can't look because you would be the one trying to stand apart from yourself to look. So I'm pointing to the sense of you. Or from your perspective, the sense of I. And just let the concept of I go. You'll notice the mind will try to think about this. It will say, oh, I think I got it, or I'm not sure I got it, or I'm not sure this makes sense. I'm asking you to just sit back into the one that's aware of those thoughts, but is not defined by the thoughts, is not contingent upon the thoughts. It's complete rest. It's the sense of being you. It's the one that's paying attention to these words. The space itself, or the knowing without a physical description of the knower. It's knowing without a concept to know. It's pure knowing. It's knowing not bound to something, some word, some idea, some narrative, some image. Do you notice that the knowing remains even when there's no thought to look at? Just pay attention to that. Pay attention to paying attention, nothing else. Don't think about this. And if a thought comes, that's fine, but that's not the I am sense. The I am sense is the easiest thing for you to inhabit because it is pure inhabiting, pure sensing, pure being. Now I can further describe it, but I will caution you that these descriptions are not something you think about. They're something that are surmised or noticed. And one is, it's boundless. There's no boundary, inside or outside. It's just this. Just the pure, aware knowing that knowing is possible. It's the pure knowing of being, as you are right now. And that may be very subtle, the recognition of boundlessness, or it may become quite obvious. But don't look for it. Don't test your experience against what I said. Just know that that is one of the typical qualities experienced. It's oceanic. It's every direction, deeply inside and outside. It includes everything. Again, this is a description that may ring true for you once you rest in that sense of I am. But before you rest in that sense, if you're thinking about it, the descriptions will just confuse you. They're just more thoughts. So disregard those descriptions if you're not yet able to rest in the sense of I am. It's paradoxically still and moving. It has a sort of scintillating or flowing experience component, and it has a deep, pervasive stillness. And again, if those tie your mind up because you're trying to conceptualize, then just fall back into the sense of I am, of being you, without qualifying what you are, without trying to think about yourself. Just feel into it. And you might start to notice this, that it's sort of both still and moving, or neither still nor moving. It's not in a conceptual category. Another quality typically observed is that it's neutral. It's not some sort of intense mystical experience. It's not otherworldly. It's just the presence of being. You could call this equanimity, balance. But again, this is just a component of the experience. The experience itself is what matters. And the willingness to keep falling back into the experience and just remain in the experience as it falls back into itself, without trying to determine where you are, whether this is the right or wrong experience with thoughts. You can let go of those thoughts and just rest here. This is the I am sense. Let the words go. You don't think I am. You don't think I. You don't think anything. Just be that pure experience that you could never not be.